What's going on, everyone? We're back on schedule 2 days in a row. Feels good. What's up, Gene, Chris, Captain Bitcoin, Ahmed, Surf Monkey, David, Tyler, Knocked. Oh wow, there's so many people in here. I'm not even gonna go down the list. Thanks everyone for joining in, being on time here as we get going. Today I want to look at a few things, and now we finally have some alts that are moving. And there's actually some real action, so this one should be a pretty good episode. Going to be looking at Bitcoin floating above this major resistance, which I'll outline, and kind of my view hasn't really changed much from yesterday, but kind of reviewing in terms of how I still think we're priced pretty neutrally. But once again, eyes on this major resistance and going over that, or major support, I should say, not resistance. After that, I'm going to look at the recent BitMEX trades. That's looking over here at ETH, which was kind of the swing that I want to jump into last night. And that is breaking up again out of what looks to be, on smaller time frames, a little bit of a falling wedge, and it's breaking up really nice. So we're going to look at ETH and catching that resistance break, and kind of where now it looks to be breaking up again. So we're going to be going over that. And then also Alt Watch. I'm going to be looking at the most recent alt trade ideas. The two yesterday were Edge and Mu. It looks like they both kind of turned up on a 4-hour candle basis, but neither have really started moving. But the reason that I looked at those alt trade ideas and why I want to probably start looking at more, and we were having an interesting discussion on the alt discussion room. I'm not sure who it was with yesterday. I kind of forget. But we were talking about, if ETH, historically, when ETH kind of leads the charge, what that means for other alts, and kind of a lot of alts are now kind of at that same support level they were early December. So I don't want to get into that yet. That's why I want to look at those, and then kind of my updated thoughts on ZCL. Kind of had a little bit of a strategy session with some other guys that I know are pretty deep, are big into ZCL as well, and spend a lot of time researching micro. So I had a strategy session talking with them. I'm going to update my views there. No spoiler alert. My views don't really change, but I'll go over what we talked about and some considerations that I think are important. And then at the end, any questions and updates as usual. So we'll get right into it with Bitcoin, even though I prefer to watch this since I still have a trade open there. Anyways, with Bitcoin, zooming out, and I cleaned up this chart a little bit more once again, but these fibs are hidden. They're still there. So this major support that I'm looking for, and if you look at it on a daily, it kind of makes things a little bit simpler, a little bit easier to follow. So over the time of this major correction, so peak up here at 1920K, bottom of the channel is where we found that major support, and now we've climbed back to kind of the midline of the channel. That's this blue dash line going through. And you can see how well it's kind of bouncing back and forth between these major fibs, right? So use the major fib as support, use 50% level as retracement. So just giving you, a few more looks at how I'm kind of determining where I think this next support will be, or where my eyes are focused. Whether or not it holds or not, that's what we're gonna have to wait and see, and that's what I want to confirm with volume. But in order to kind of even pick or determine the zone where I'm watching is that major fib level. So zooming in a little bit, seeing where we are. Yesterday or last night, I guess from midnight my time until I woke up, we had this nice pop, which it looks to be a little bit of a support block in this range, right? And it's just being determined based on previous supports back here. Previous supports, you could even extend it. In this zone, this is clearly a support block. Price rose above, once again used it as support when it moved up. As it moved down, this was once again a support block. So we weren't able to make it down to the key support that I'm looking for, which is down here in the major fib levels. And this is based off the major fib levels and this previous support, this previous resistance. And once again, I expect it to act as support. Let me color this green now. So we still didn't get down there, but I think we will get down there. Interestingly enough, I know I've talked a little bit about the bot over the last week or over the last coming days. If you have any questions about that, I would definitely check out my past 2 or 3 videos. I go over it at least briefly, and I'll probably answer most of the preliminary questions. Anyways, interestingly enough, the bot's last trade was I believe it was a short from 10,350. It just closed that short last night at 10, I don't even know, 10.1, and it looks to be short again. And kind of my view, regardless of the bot, regardless of kind of those quant signals, just technically kind of my target for Bitcoin, regardless of whether or not I'm going to trade or anything like that, my target for where price action is headed is this zone. That's really where I feel the next support is. That's where I feel our trajectory is kind of taking us. I think this is the major support that we're going to need to test. So that's remains my view. Nothing new for Bitcoin. From a bigger picture, and what I wanted to zoom out and talk about, which I've kind of gone over, drawing squiggles over the last few days, is still, even in this support zone, I would almost argue, anywhere really in here. So let me get my marker out. Anything in this region, all the way up the channel, in my own opinion, isn't anything to be too excited about, right? I still like the extreme. So kind of just keeping that in mind. I do want to, I do think this is where we go next in terms of major support, and that's what I'm looking for. But in all honesty, when you zoom out, when you think of Bitcoin moves over months and weeks and kind of look back, the extremes are kind of where to get excited and where to make those serious tactical shifts in your portfolio, whether you're a trader, whether you're an investor, just kind of shifting your allocations around the extremes. So the bottom third and the top third is where you really want to kind of be excited and paying attention. Honestly, I still think we're close to kind of the middle or the neutral section. So this is where I have that support. This is where I think we're going. Whether or not it holds, we will see with volume. But that's where I think we head next. It's kind of where we've been heading as well. So I expect that to continue. Let's see what else we have. The BitMEX trade that I covered yesterday was ETH. You guys know I usually trade just Bitcoin on there, but every once in a while I will dip into some alts on BitMEX. The play that I was looking for, and it was contrary to kind of, looks on my phone, messed with these fib levels. It was my view ever since, looking at this from a channel perspective as well, zooming out and getting rid of my scribbles. It was my view for a long time, and even when it was maybe unpopular, that we would get down to this consolidation level or this support level here, and we got there. Once we broke it, zoom in a little bit, and this is representative of all the alts kind of dipping, all the alts bleeding. Once we broke through it, initially I expected something like this, right? It would come down, it would now use this broken support, this support here, use this broken support as resistance for the next move down to the even lower support. I think it's still possible, but I never really want to get married or too attached to one of my views, and especially if it's just because I don't want to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong if you can be wrong and then flip your view and make money, right? So I want to be as objective as possible. So the price action that I was watching yesterday with Ethereum was, as we began to test this, I was watching it test all day, watching it test the resistance, use the resistance, move down. Watch it test the resistance, use resistance, and move down. Eventually, it broke right through, and on some really small time frames, which I like to use longer time frames to confirm, but I was using the smaller time frames, and when I first saw it peak, why not use the ETH high of this cycle to draw your fib? Jason, I'll go over that in 1 second for sure. When I first saw on a smaller time frame it peak and break above this level that it had been touching, with wicks the entire time and getting, assed right down, it breached through that. And that was kind of the initial. It was kind of a risky. I don't like to play with a lot of breakouts, but that was a nice sign for me. So I decided to play the long, threw that into the BitMEX trade ideas, and it's turned out to be a pretty nice trade so far. Where are we at? Get rid of all these scribbles because I never do. And it was also asymmetric in the sense that I'm always looking for trying to measure risk reward. The risk reward that I measured for this was, if this is kind of the next major resistance, in my opinion, based off the prior fibs, if we're going off kind of peaks or where this support is, this resistance would be 15%, and I was willing to give it, down below this ascending triangle support. So it was something like a 5-to-1, right? If that's 15%, that is 3%. So I like that risk reward. It's doing all right so far. Took some partial profits last night, but the next actual take profit is set at that 15%. 15% would actually be up here at 0.094. 0.089 would be the next place that I would even consider taking profits, but that'd be way up here, and that's based off this peak. So it'd be 8 or 10%, which isn't a lot in terms of a Bittrex trade, but on BitMEX, an 8 or 9% move is pretty considerable. Cool. That gets that out of the way. On some smaller time frames, I do think now this is a falling wedge. It looks to have broken out, but on such small volume and such small time frames, I don't like to really share or really put too much faith into these. I want to see, it looks like we did get a really nice spike, but I want to see what happens in the 1 hour and the 4 hour, and see if this momentum can actually carry through and keep going. So that's what I'm looking for with the ETH trade. I know a couple of you guys caught that one with me. Nice to catch that one and kind of keep a nice string of BitMEX trades alive. Jason has a good question. Why not use ETH high of this cycle to draw your fib? This fib isn't based off this. This is an extension that I've used and I've kept on the chart for a while. This is an extension from the swing low to the swing high, back to the swing low. And it was to project out kind of possible supports or resistances based off that. The only reason I'm using that is because I used it in this last cycle as well. And now it's really confusing because there's a million yellow lines. But up here, it was extremely helpful in kind of determining peaks and resistances and supports. So similar to when Bitcoin was in its kind of parabolic channel or inching it seemed like every single week it made a higher high in the channel. Let me go back. When we were back here in November, October, and September, you couldn't really use a retracement and say, couldn't all the time use a retracement and say, this is where I think price will retrace to. Sometimes you needed to project targets out. So what I did for that is I would use these extensions. So swing low to the swing high to the swing low, and it would project out levels above, right? So it's exact same premise. But with ETH, since we're moving up in the channel, I wanted to project out those levels ahead of where we were. So I drew it when we were actually back here at, early December, and I've kind of let these levels stay, if that makes sense. Jason, but to also answer your question, because I think it was you who presented a really nice fib, you could certainly use this recent swing low to the swing high and project out, retracement levels for the move higher. So you certainly could. There's no right or wrong there, as long as you're drawing it objectively from a swing low to a swing high. But I'm just using the extension levels. It's what's been on my chart longer, and I'm finding them quite helpful, especially in kind of finding this little resistance break. It proved to be a really nice kind of a key line right there. After it broke that level, it really took off. So I'm going to keep using those. Good stuff. What else do we have? Also, in terms of BitMEX, the bot is short. Once again, like I said, and it closed out another profitable short trade. If you have any more questions on that, I'm not going to post the updated spreadsheet until the end of the week. I want a bunch of data points on there before I start really pointing to that too much. I want to also clean up and see how it's actually performing for a full week before I start paying too much attention to every single signal it spits out. But it's exciting. It's another profitable trade. I think it's now 2 or 3 in a row. The last one was pretty big, and it looks like if this goes technically also where I'm viewing it, it should be another nice profitable trade. So if you ever have something that's winning over 50% of its trades, and it's also, the percent profits are bigger than the percent losses, then that's attractive, at least early on, but nothing is conclusive yet. In terms of alt watch from recent trades, there was 2 trades that I gave yesterday, both from the assistance of Tommy and I think Voidbox. Found the other one. You guys are like my alert system right now. I didn't have alerts placed for either of these, but you guys both spotted them, either based on your own levels or based on previous trades that we had taken in here. The first one I'm going to cover is Edge, because I used to go over this so much, and I think you guys know how much I used to trade Edge. More because it gave us a few 2Xs than anything. But the Edge setup here, and because it's a range as well, and I'm more comfortable in ranges, looking at this from a range perspective, if this is the all-time low, this is kind of the top of the range of the all-time high. I'm not going to count this ridiculous candle of when it started trading. If this is the all-time high of the range, we're back at all-time low support. And we took a few trades back here. This was in November. And then also December, we had a couple really nice spikes. This was pre-license. Then we had the actual license launch. And the most recent trade we were looking to take on Edge was back here when it came up. We were looking for when the actual platform launched, it would give us one more 2x from this mid-range support all the way up to the kind of the all-time high. So I break this range down into two different ranges. This being support, this being resistance, and then kind of this is the midline. This is support, this is resistance. For the most recent platform one, once the platform came out, it was a dud. I kind of talked about just cutting losses on that one or not cutting losses, even able to get out above break even. I know a couple of people stayed in it. I know a couple of people even escaped with a small profit there, but once that platform launched and it was a clear dud, I didn't want to be holding on to it. I don't think some of these coins are particularly strong fundamentally. So if kind of the technical or the narrative setup kind of fails, those are the kind of the ones that I just want to cut my losses on. And if it would have happened to 2x, then you know what? I'm happy missing that trade if it helps me kind of reduce the risk of getting stuck in something that then moves down 50%. Anyways, it's now down at the all-time low support. So it has fallen through this level one time. This is the very bottom of the last alt cycles. This is December 6th, December 7th. It's interesting in that, and we had this discussion yesterday, is kind of what I mentioned at the beginning of the stream. A lot of these alts are now at the same support they were at the beginning of the current alt cycle. So December 5th through December 7th, if you scroll through all your alt charts and look at, across the board where we're alts at, a lot of them are now kind of at the same support they were at back then. So what that means is it's definitely piquing my interest, and especially with ETH kind of leading the charge, it's nothing too confirmed yet. We're still kind of hanging right at this support, and we've already broken it. But they are incredibly attractive in the sense that Edge has never traded below this. That's not to say it won't, and that's not to say that other alts also won't, especially if ETH drops lower. But this support is attractive enough that I wanted to take the risk. All-time low support, the first target for this is the exact same as the target for the other trades, and it's going to be the top of this range. So that'd be a 2x. You guys know how I like to work. I typically want to set my target a little bit below resistance, because if you set it right at the actual resistance or right at where these candles are peaking, way less chance of getting filled, as opposed to if you submit it right before the resistance, you have a better chance of getting filled. Sometimes even I'll scatter. So I like to scale in, I like to scale out of positions. So if I'm picking the intermittent or kind of the middle target, that's based off of these previous resistances. And obviously right now this isn't as exact. I'm just doing this for the stream. But that's what I would base it off of where we're getting these resistances mid-range is kind of where I'd want that first target. So that's what I'm looking at with Edge. Technically, it's a pure technical setup, but I think it's a technical setup and a technical range that I like enough to take the risk. So a nice first kind of 4-hour little move, but it's nothing. I imagine it'll pop down, pop back down at least to this all-time low support one more time, and we'll see if it breaks through. But it's something that I'm comfortable taking the risk on when it's down at all-time low support. That's the first alt trade idea from yesterday. The second one is Mu. And the exact same storyline here. I even kind of wrote it out in terms of comments. So exact same support, December 5th through the 7th. We're back at that all-time low support. Not all-time low here for Mu, but we're back at the same support as the beginning of the alt cycle. Tried to catch one trade in here on Mu. And this is these are three kind of support zones, intermittent, with the final target being the top of this kind of range. This range is a little bit more abstract though. But now we are back at that all-time, or not all-time low, I keep saying that, but the same support that we were at the beginning of the current alt cycle. So that's why I like Mu down here, and it's a risk that I want to take. Exact same kind of candle structure to Edges. We have the initial jump, and now it's kind of sitting. I wouldn't be surprised actually if it came back down to that ideal support again. But anyways, something that I would be comfortable taking the risk on. That's the Mu setup. Both of them are kind of the same storyline there. That's that. And then ZCL, Z Classic, I'm going to update that one. You guys know how much I've updated this one, how much I like this one. So the talk I had this morning, and it's a talk that I know Jeff and a couple other guys in the discussion room have talked about it. I imagine a few of you, or maybe even a lot of you, are in Z Classic. And I was looking or thinking about, and people were talking about whether to sell before the snapshot, whether to hold through the snapshot and collect Bitcoin private. When's it going to dump and all that. I think one thing is for sure. I think that Z Classic will definitely dump after the snapshot. It just becomes a case of, do you think the Bitcoin private coins will be worth what Z Classic is being priced in at right now? So if we go to ZCL coin, so if Z Classic's worth $133, we're going to look at Bitcoin Gold. Over here at $121, and then, best case scenario is it's priced eventually at something like Bitcoin Cash, but who knows, right? Do you think the Bitcoin private will be worth holding the Z Classic for? And I personally reduced the position to a normal trade size, and that's kind of what I'm still sitting at with Z Classic. Obviously, when we first got in, and all the entries, most of the entries, almost every single one, is still up considerable. That one's up 50%. This one's up over 2x. And, even back here, 10 or 20 times. Most of mine are filled from back here at around 100,000 sats. Some at 550. It's like I definitely scaled down considerably. So the position is risk-free, but it's still capital. It's still principal that I don't want to just lose. So I want to still play this correctly. Jason, another good question. I'll go over that in a second. It's my thought process on it still is I want to hold the Z Classic and collect the Bitcoin private, but I do want to kind of throw out there, I think this is going to be a longer term play than some people are expecting, in the sense that if you hold your Z Classic and get Bitcoin private, I don't think it's something where you're going to see the value that Bitcoin private, whether it's $100 or $200 or $500. I don't think you're going to see that for maybe even a few months until Bittrex or something can support it. So best case scenario, we do see Bittrex or Binance announce support, and that's awesome. But if an exchange doesn't pick it up, you might kind of have to sit there and hold the bag. So if you aren't comfortable doing that, if you're still viewing it solely as a trade, then it might make more sense to kind of get out of Z Classic before the snapshot. Because right after the snapshot, even right before the snapshot, it could dump. And I think it's actually likely to. So I want to throw that out there. Think of it, are you viewing this as a trade, or is it something you're comfortable holding, for maybe a month or 2 months or however long it takes for Bittrex private or Bitcoin private to get onto Bittrex or onto Binance? Jason has a good question. Normal trade size in terms of percentage of your portfolio. So I have those 3 sections of my portfolio: the ICO, the investing, and the trading. In the trading portfolio, I'm usually taking, I usually don't want to be in more than 4 coins in that trading portfolio. So 4 trades. Of that trading portfolio, those positions are about 10%. So, sometimes maybe they can balloon up, obviously a little bit bigger. In the case of ZCL, they definitely did. But 10%, that sounds big. But let's just say trading percentage of my portfolio, if the portfolios are split up 3, if I'm kind of calling them 3 separate things, 10% of 33%, it would still be like a 3% of the total portfolio into one trade, if that makes sense. Some people say 1%. That's kind of the traditional, risk management. 1 or 2, never risk more than 1 or 2% of your portfolio on a trade. That could also mean putting 10% of your entire portfolio, into a trade and having a 10% stop loss. So you could kind of have that 1% risk the same way, if that makes sense. So I like to think of it, and I think it's less important of what I do. I think it's just super important to understand different ways to manage that risk. So I think the best ways are through having a predetermined stop loss or a predetermined area, even if it's not a stop, and then having, accounting for position sizing. So not going all in on one trade, but if you do go all in, let's say you put 100% of your portfolio into one position, then maybe having a stop loss around 2 or 3% move against you. I think that's pretty reckless and ridiculous. It's just an arbitrary example of how you could still control even if your position size was really big. And disclaimer, as I always throw out there, guys, none of this is ever financial advice. I am just kind of going through my process, my analysis, and my general thoughts. Any other questions here? Covered a few good ones. I imagine we're going to see some more action in terms of alts, especially if ETH actually breaks upwards, and we see more alts kind of drift down to if they keep drifting down to that December 5th, December 7th kind of support. Those are risks that I'll take. In the sense that if it moves against me, if those positions move against me 5 or 10%, and they break through that low support that they were at the beginning of the alt cycle, and to visualize what that looks like, if this is the beginning of the alt cycle, December 5th, December 7th. Once again, this is the general timing guide that I use. This is December 5th, December 7th right here. If alts, because not all the charts look like this. In fact, they look very different. But if this is kind of visualizing the cycle, and when ETH was at this support, they were at their respective support at this time. And now those other alts are at that same support, that would look like this. That means like, ETH is down here, right? If ETH was down here, personally, I'd be all over ETH. I'd be moving heavily into ETH down here. So if those other alts are kind of in that same zone, along that same support as where they started the cycle, those are risks that I'm going to take. Because if they move below that support, I'll realize a 5 or 10% loss, and that's it. I'll realize the loss. It's an asymmetric setup in the sense that there are long supports that I like. There are long supports that historically have been attractive in terms of value. There's no real way to value these coins other than that. I guess you could look at addressable markets and stuff, but there's no cash flows. There's nothing. So I use technical analysis, and I think it's very helpful. It's been very helpful in the past. So those are risks that I want to take. So we'll see if coins keep drifting down to those December 5th, December 7th levels. We'll see on how many I want to pull the trigger on, but they're attractive, and I'll keep finding them, keep finding the looks. And then also for the BitMEX trade, I'm going to keep you guys updated in terms of ETH, what happens here. So I'm in this one, still holding that position, long ETH. And according to the bot, I am also trading the bot signals right now. I'm short Bitcoin, and I'm kind of aiming just to wrap up on Bitcoin, which is what I like to do anyways. I'm technically aiming for this major support anyways. But I'm going to follow what the bot's doing with a very small, very small position sizes. I just want to put real money into it and see kind of accounting for slippage, accounting for, whether or not I get filled. I want to see how effective this bot can be with some real money, even if it's, tiny percentages. So that's all I have today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Some good Bitcoin coverage. I think it's important to look at those trades, not only from the entries, but also from trade management and risk reward perspectives. I'm going to keep an eye on ETH. That's the one I'm most excited about. And yeah, everything else going well. Good to be back on a schedule. I'll be on schedule again tomorrow. So same time tomorrow, Saturday, at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. The bot Moogle said the bot likes to signal while we sleep. Yeah, it does. It does. That's why I put on the @everyone updates. You're gonna have to turn on the Discord alerts. I don't think if this really turns out the way that I think it will, then I'll look into actually having it written up the correct way. The Koreans actually having it written up the right way, and probably actually having it converted to a different language, and then possibly looking into connecting it to APIs. But that's a few steps down the road. This is really more just an experiment for me. I love testing rules-based strategies. I'm not too convinced of it. I've backtested a million strategies that made so much money initially, and then they crash. So you know what? I don't want to get too excited, but it's just one of those experiments. Kind of one of the things that I want to test and build out. Anyways, cheers. Signing off, guys. I'll be in the Discord after I get a sandwich and a workout in, that is. So I'll see you guys this afternoon.